I never thought I'd find myself crossing such a forbidden line, with my best friend's wife of all people. It's strange how life can unravel in the most unexpected ways, like watching a picture-perfect puzzle suddenly fall to pieces. I live in a quiet, family-focused suburb just outside London, the sort of place that seems tailor-made for raising kids and living an idyllic life. On the surface, my wife, Madison, and I had exactly that. To outsiders, our life seemed like something out of a glossy lifestyle magazine. Enviable, harmonious, the epitome of a happy family. We weren't just lucky with our family. We had incredible neighbors too, Owen and Ashley. For over a decade, the four of us were inseparable, practically family rather than just friends. Our lives intertwined through countless moments. Summer barbecues filled with laughter, New Year's Eve fireworks lighting up the sky, double dates that ran late into the night, and trips to the beach that left us sunburned and content. We shared everything: stories, memories, and endless bottles of wine under the stars. But amidst all that camaraderie, there was something unspoken between Ashley and me. It's hard to put into words, but we connected in a way that felt different. Our conversations went deeper, about life, our personal struggles, and the dreams we kept tucked away. It was as if we understood parts of each other no one else did. At family gatherings, we'd often slip away into the garden, seeking a brief reprieve from the noise, stealing moments to just talk, leaving everyone else inside engrossed in some trivial game. That connection felt safe until it wasn't. One evening, things shifted. Owen was away on a business trip, Bristol if I recall correctly, when Ashley called me unexpectedly. Her voice quivered on the other end of the line, a rare vulnerability that caught me off guard. She asked if I could meet her at this small, dimly lit pub called the Rusty Nail. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet corner of town with creaky furniture and a pool table that had seen better days. Still, it felt oddly fitting for whatever she needed to discuss. When I arrived, I found her sitting alone, her fingers tapping nervously on the rim of her glass. Ashley looked so unlike herself, fragile, hesitant. Normally, she carried herself with a confidence that made you feel she had everything under control. But that night, her usual composure was gone. Without hesitation, she got straight to the point. She suspected Owen was cheating. She recounted the signs. The late nights explained away with flimsy excuses about work, the unfamiliar scent of perfume clinging to him, and how he had become fiercely protective of his phone, as if it held his deepest secrets. At first, I couldn't process what I was hearing. Owen? My best friend? The man I trusted implicitly? The thought of him betraying Ashley seemed absurd. But there she was, desperate and broken. I couldn't just walk away, so I told her I'd help her get to the bottom of it. Maybe I was naive, but I hoped to prove her wrong. That was the beginning of everything. Ashley and I became unlikely detectives, piecing together Owen's routines and tracking where he went when he claimed to be at work. She even tried to snoop through his phone, but he was far too cautious. We came up empty-handed. Meanwhile, I began to notice things about Madison. My wife, once so attentive and affectionate, had grown distant. Her warmth had been replaced by a chilling indifference. There were evenings when she'd come home late, smelling of wine and brushing off any questions about her day. At the time, I chalked it up to stress, but now, I wasn't so sure. For weeks, Ashley and I met regularly, dissecting every detail, desperate to uncover the truth. Each meeting brought us closer, but also dangerously close to something I couldn't quite define. And as I started noticing cracks in my own marriage, I wondered if this investigation was exposing more than just Owen's secrets. Ashley and I started meeting more often, usually when Madison wasn't around, or we'd sit together in her garden late into the night, whispering like a pair of conspirators. What began as a mission to help her soon morphed into something more, something neither of us could fully articulate. There was an undeniable closeness growing between us, a connection built on shared frustrations and the unspoken weight of everything we couldn't admit to anyone else. In those moments, it felt like a relief to be understood, to sit across from someone who truly got it, the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a life where nothing made sense anymore. The nights stretched longer as our conversations drifted from casual chats to deeply personal confessions. We talked about everything: Our faltering marriages, the regrets we carried, the dreams we'd let slip away, and the fears that kept us awake at night. Every time I saw the sadness in her eyes, I felt an overwhelming urge to shield her from it all, to somehow make things right. That protective instinct was impossible to ignore, and with each passing night, the line between friendship and something more blurred. Yet, I kept telling myself it was just the stress, that the emotions clouding my judgment weren't real. But we were so consumed with unraveling Owen's supposed betrayal that we failed to notice the larger betrayal unfolding right in front of us. The irony of it all would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. Weeks of late nights, hushed conversations, and chasing down dead ends left us exhausted. There were moments when it all felt pointless, like we were chasing shadows. I'd find myself on the verge of walking away, telling Ashley we should just let it go. But the look in her eyes stopped me every time. She needed me, and if I was honest, I needed her too. And then, it all came crashing down with one email. A single message from an anonymous sender. Like something pulled straight out of a bad soap opera. Shattered everything. I'll never forget the sound of Ashley's trembling voice when she called, asking me to come over immediately. At first, I assumed she'd found another meaningless clue, something we'd obsess over for hours. But this was different. When I arrived, she was seated at her dining table, her laptop open in front of her, her face pale as a ghost. She didn't say a word, just gestured for me to sit and look at the screen. There they were, the photos, taken at some elegant restaurant with soft, romantic lighting. They left no room for doubt. Owen, my best friend, looked completely at ease, his expression smug, holding hands with a woman across the table. My first instinct was to deny what I was seeing, to convince myself it couldn't possibly be real. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. That woman wasn't just anyone. It was Madison, my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children. And there she was, not just sitting with Owen, but holding his hand as though it was the most natural thing in the world. She was smiling at him with that same radiant grin I once thought was reserved for me. Felt like being hit by a freight train. My chest tightened as the realization sank in, leaving me gasping for air. I just sat there, frozen, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. This had to be a mistake, some kind of mix-up. But the photos were crystal clear, unmistakable in their detail. My wife, my best friend, entwined in each other's lives while I was blind to it all. Ashley sat across from me, her hands trembling so violently she couldn't even close the laptop. Her own devastation mirrored mine, though I could barely process it. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. I just sat there, staring at the screen as the weight of everything came crashing down. How had I missed this? The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the evasiveness, the strange distance between Madison and me. But I ignored it, brushed it off, convinced myself it was nothing. Now, the truth was staring back at me in high-definition clarity, and there was no escaping it. How could I have missed it all? The signs were there, plain as day, yet I'd been blind to them. We sat in a silence so heavy it felt like it might crush us both. I couldn't tell you how long we stayed like that, minutes, hours? Time seemed irrelevant. Eventually, Ashley broke the stillness, walking over to me and wrapping her arms around my shoulders. And that's when I completely unraveled. I'm not the kind of man who cries. I hadn't shed a single tear in years, not even during the toughest moments of my life. But that day, I broke. The dam I didn't even know existed inside me shattered, and the tears came pouring out. Ashley, bless her, just held me. She didn't say a word, didn't try to console me with empty platitudes. She simply held me, and in that moment, it felt like she understood everything I was feeling, because she was living it too. Why? I finally managed to croak, my voice cracking like brittle wood. Why would they do this to us? Ashley shook her head, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I don't know, Elton. I wish I did. And that was the hardest part. The not knowing. There were no answers, just an endless stream of questions that gnawed at my sanity. How long had this been going on? How many times had they lied to me? How many nights had they stolen from us while we sat at home? Oblivious? The thought of Madison sneaking around, building a secret life with Owen, made me physically ill. Every excuse she'd given me. The late nights at work, the weekend trips with her friends, the little white lies she'd fed me. All came rushing back like a montage from a horror movie. I couldn't believe how blind I'd been, how easily I'd dismissed the clues. Ashley and I spent hours talking, or maybe it was more like venting. The pain, the anger, the betrayal. It all came pouring out in waves. It was as if we were bleeding from the same wound, both of us trying to process a devastation too massive to comprehend. I learned things about Madison that I never wanted to know. Ashley told me about moments she'd noticed over the years, little red flags that didn't seem significant at the time. In turn, I shared my own suspicions about Owen. How he'd always been just a little too attentive to Madison. How his jokes had, in hindsight, carried undertones I should have questioned. At first, the emotions were like a tidal wave of despair. A crushing, nauseating sense that everything I'd built was crumbling around me. But despair doesn't last forever. Slowly, it transformed into something darker. Rage. Blinding, all-consuming rage. I wasn't just angry at Owen and Madison. I was furious with myself. How had I let this happen? I was supposed to protect my marriage, to hold my family together, and I'd failed. I let them destroy everything, right under my nose. Ashley's fury matched mine, maybe even surpassed it. She talked about how Owen had always been her anchor, the person she trusted above all else. And now he was nothing but a lying, cheating bastard. As we sat there, our anger feeding off each other's, something shifted. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about justice or maybe revenge. "We need to make them pay," Ashley said, her voice cold, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and determination. "They need to regret every single second they spent together." She didn't have to convince me. I was already in. I didn't care what it took. I'd do whatever it took to make Madison and Owen feel even a fraction of the anguish they'd caused us. So, there we were. Two people shattered by the betrayal of the people we'd trusted most, now bound together by a shared thirst for vengeance. I didn't know what our next move would be, but one thing was certain: Madison and Owen had no idea who they were messing with. For weeks, I'd thought that catching them in the act, exposing their lies, would bring me some kind of peace. But now I realized closure wasn't enough. It wasn't just about ending their affair. It was about making sure they never forgot the pain they'd inflicted. I thought that having the proof would make everything clear, that once we saw the truth laid out before us, it would somehow start to make sense. But the deeper Ashley and I dug, the more it felt like quicksand. Every step pulling me further into helplessness, anger, and frustration. We made a pact early on: no rash decisions, no dramatic confrontations, no angry outbursts. As shattered as we were, we knew rushing in without a plan would only make things worse. We needed to be smart, methodical, and most of all, prepared. So that's what we did. For weeks, we played detective, peeling back the layers of their lies to see how far this betrayal truly went. Ashley became an expert at tracking Owen's schedule, sneaking glances at his phone whenever she could. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Madison, scrutinizing every detail of her life like I was trying to solve a puzzle I desperately didn't want to complete. And honestly, I wish I could say the truth shocked me. But once you know what to look for, the signs are everywhere. Madison, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had become a stranger in our home. Her so-called work evenings started cropping up more frequently, and wouldn't you know it, they perfectly aligned with Owen's calendar. She'd throw out the same tired excuse, client meetings, as if that was supposed to satisfy me, but I wasn't buying it anymore. Her mood swings were the most telling. The smallest things would set her off, like she was deliberately building walls between us, creating distance so she could live her secret life without interruption. And then there were the nights when she'd come home late, claiming she was too tired to talk, her clothes reeking of cheap wine despite her attempts to mask it. I wasn't blind. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to see it. I told myself it was just stress, a rough patch, something we'd work through. When you're in love, You convince yourself of all kinds of lies just to avoid the pain of the truth. During all of this, Ashley and I only grew closer. It wasn't planned, it just happened. We spent countless hours together, sharing whispers over late-night phone calls. Our voices hushed like we were plotting against the world. It felt like we were partners in a storm, rowing the same battered boat through an endless sea of chaos. Every day brought a new clue, a new piece of the puzzle, and we couldn't stop until we'd seen the whole picture. We both knew suspicion wasn't enough. Confronting them with just words would be pointless. They'd deny, deflect, twist the narrative. We needed hard evidence, the kind that couldn't be explained away. Proof that would leave no room for doubt or manipulation. That's when we made the decision. We had to see it for ourselves. The idea of catching them in the act was terrifying, and I had no idea how I'd handle it once the truth was undeniable. But at that point, the unknown felt worse than anything else. We got a small, discreet camera, something we could hide without being noticed. My heart raced with adrenaline when we planted one at Owen and Ashley's house, then did the same in mine. Felt surreal, like we'd stepped into a spy thriller. Except this wasn't some made-up drama. These were our lives, and the stakes were as real as it gets. One evening, Ashley came over to my house. Madison had given me her usual excuse. Another late night at work. What a surprise. We knew we had a few hours to ourselves, just enough time to review whatever footage we'd managed to collect. We sat on the couch, hunched over my laptop, the weight of what we were doing pressing heavily on both of us. At first, there was nothing, just hours of mundane footage that felt like a complete waste. We scrolled endlessly, praying for the one moment that would confirm everything we already knew. As the minutes ticked by, the silence between us grew thicker, almost unbearable. And then, in that stillness, something shifted. It was one of those moments where everything falls into place, where the pieces of the puzzle finally connect. We sat there, waiting for something to happen on the screen, but in that silence, something else began to stir between us. Have you ever felt like the air itself was charged? Like something inevitable was about to unfold even if you couldn't name it? That was the moment. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It wasn't just about exposing their lies. It was about two shattered souls trying to piece together something, anything that resembled wholeness. Ashley turned to me, and in her eyes, I saw something unspoken. Maybe it was a plea for comfort, or perhaps it was a desperate need to escape the crushing weight we were both carrying. I recognized it instantly because I felt it too. That ache, that raw longing to be seen, to be held, to feel something other than invisible and discarded. "This is so messed up," she whispered, her voice trembling with the fragility of our situation. I swallowed hard, barely able to find my voice. "Yeah, it really is." We sat there only inches apart, yet it felt like a chasm separated us. And then, without warning, something shifted. I couldn't tell you who moved first. The details blurred into the intensity of the moment. Before I realized what was happening, she was in my arms, and I was kissing her with a desperation that felt like survival itself. It wasn't a choice. It was instinct, a raw, urgent need to feel grounded in the midst of the chaos. I know what you're thinking. How could I do it? How could I betray my marriage, even after everything Madison had done? But in that instant, none of it mattered. The past, the future, the pain, it all faded away. All that existed was Ashley and me, two broken people clinging to each other, trying to make sense of our shattered worlds. We didn't make it to the bedroom. Hell, we didn't even make it off the couch. It wasn't tender or poetic. It was raw. It was urgent. It was exactly what we both needed at that moment. And yes, I'd be lying if I said part of it wasn't about revenge, about reclaiming some sense of power in a situation where we'd been left feeling powerless. But it was more than that. It was about feeling wanted again. About finding solace in someone who understood the depths of the betrayal and helplessness we were drowning in. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the glow of the laptop screen casting a dim, eerie light over us. There was no awkwardness, no regret, just a strange, quiet calm, like we'd stumbled onto something neither of us knew we needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt okay. Maybe even hopeful in a strange, inexplicable way. But then the morning came, and with it, reality. We didn't speak about what happened. We didn't try to justify or define it. There was no need. We both understood it changed nothing. We were still two people left wrecked by the people we trusted most. But for that one night, we'd found a fleeting sense of comfort in the chaos. I knew this wasn't some fairy tale. Ashley and I weren't destined to ride off into the sunset. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if, somehow, we could get through this mess together. Because sometimes, the only way to find light is to wade through the darkness first. After everything, after discovering Madison and Owen's betrayal, after that night with Ashley, you'd think I'd want to walk away, to leave it all behind and start fresh. But you can't just move on when your entire world has been set on fire. Closure wasn't enough. We didn't just want to heal. We wanted revenge. Raw, unfiltered revenge. And we didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. This wasn't some impulsive, heat-of-the-moment decision. We didn't throw ourselves into reckless confrontations or unplanned acts of fury. No, this was different. We took our time, calculated our moves with care and precision. Every step we took was deliberate, methodical. Because we weren't just looking to expose their betrayal, we wanted them to pay for it. And we were prepared to do whatever it took to make sure they did. We became like two generals planning a battlefield strategy. Each move calculated with one goal in mind: total destruction. In our eyes, the only way to win this war was to burn everything to the ground. Our first step was stepping up our surveillance game. The single camera we'd planted earlier had been enough to catch glimpses of their betrayal. But glimpses weren't enough anymore. We needed undeniable, inescapable proof. Evidence so clear that there'd be no way for them to wriggle out of the mess they'd created. So we went all in. Multiple cameras. One in the bedroom, another in the living room, a few carefully hidden in Owen and Ashley's place. Setting everything up was nerve-wracking. It wasn't as simple as sneaking a camera onto a shelf. It took several failed attempts and way too many close calls. I can't count the number of times we held our breath, praying we wouldn't get caught sneaking in and out of our own homes like criminals. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But it felt necessary. And every time my heart raced with the thrill of it, I convinced myself it would all be worth it in the end. Then came the waiting. Days turned into weeks as we monitored the footage, hoping for something, anything, that would give us what we needed. In the meantime, Ashley and I kept our distance. Whatever had happened between us that night, whatever solace we'd found in each other, we both knew we couldn't afford to lose focus. This wasn't about us. It was about them. About justice. About making them pay for what they'd done. And then, the moment we'd been waiting for finally arrived. I was sitting in my living room, zoning out in front of the TV, when Ashley called. Her voice was frantic, breathless. "Elton, you need to come over. Now." I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and rushed to her place, my mind spinning with possibilities. When I walked in, Ashley didn't say a word. She simply handed me her laptop and hit play. There they were, Owen and Madison, wrapped up in each other on my couch. The sight of them together made my stomach churn, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. And then I noticed it, the dress. Madison was wearing the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The one she'd claimed she didn't like, that she'd shoved to the back of her closet, saying it didn't suit her. Yet here she was, wearing it for him on my couch in my house. I felt my fists clench so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every nerve in my body screamed with rage. Ashley, though, was eerily calm. Her face was set in a mask of quiet, steely resolve. By that point, I think her tears had run dry, replaced by cold, unrelenting determination. "We've got them," she said, her voice steady and matter-of-fact, like she was delivering the final verdict in a trial. "We've got everything we need." She was right. The footage was damning, clear as day. And it wasn't just that one night. Over the next few days, the cameras captured them again and again. Sometimes at my house. Sometimes at Owen and Ashley's apartment. Always in the middle of their tangled web of lies, acting like they were the only two people in the world. Watching it was excruciating, like a knife slowly twisting in my back with every new clip. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of satisfaction. Each clip was another nail in their coffins, another piece of evidence we could use to bring them down. The idea to upload the footage online came from Ashley. "They need to feel the humiliation they've put us through," she said one evening, her voice sharp, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and vengeance. "Not just them. Everyone. Their friends. Their family. Their coworkers. The whole damn world." At first, I hesitated. The thought of exposing everything to the world felt extreme, like crossing a line we could never uncross. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about our own lives, our dignity. Sharing this dirty laundry for everyone to see felt dangerous, final. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Ashley had a point. They hadn't just hurt us. They'd humiliated us, trampled on everything we thought we had. Maybe it was time for them to know what it felt like. The more I thought about Ashley's idea, the more it made sense. Why should we protect them? Why should we keep their dirty secret hidden when they had gone out of their way to destroy our lives? They had made their choices, selfish, cruel choices, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. We spent the next week meticulously preparing. We compiled the footage, cutting it down to the most damning, irrefutable moments. Every clip was carefully selected to have maximum impact. I set up fake social media accounts and burner email addresses, making sure we had everything we needed to deliver a digital strike they'd never see coming. It felt like we were gearing up for war, and this time we were the ones with the power. When everything was ready, we didn't hesitate. We pulled the trigger. The videos went live, shared across multiple platforms with every relevant person tagged. Friends, family, coworkers. Anyone remotely connected to Owen or Madison was about to see the truth of what they'd done. The fallout was instant. It was like striking a match in a room soaked in gasoline. Within hours, the videos were everywhere, shared and reshared until it felt like the entire world had seen them. People I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, shocked, horrified, disgusted by what they were witnessing. I could only imagine what was happening on Madison's end. Her phone was undoubtedly blowing up, but I wouldn't know. I'd already blocked her number. As far as I was concerned, she no longer existed. Owen, predictably, tried to contain the damage. He called Ashley, attempting to spin his side of the story, but she wasn't having any of it. Ashley was unstoppable, a force of nature fueled by fury and betrayal. Every weak excuse he made only seemed to strengthen her resolve. As much as I hated what we had become, people so consumed by revenge we'd crossed every line imaginable, part of me felt vindicated. They had torn our lives apart, left us shattered and humiliated. Now it was their turn to face the wreckage. But here's the truth. Revenge doesn't bring peace. Watching their lives implode didn't erase the pain or give me the closure I thought it would. It was messy, chaotic, and ugly. Deep down, I knew we were only adding to the damage, making things worse for ourselves in the long run. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All I cared about was making them pay. And they did. When those videos went live, I thought I was prepared for the aftermath. But nothing could have readied me for the firestorm that followed. It was like dropping a bomb right in the middle of their lives, and the explosion was swift and brutal. Friends, family, co-workers, even acquaintances were blindsided by the truth. Their secret was no longer a secret. It was out there for everyone to see, and there was no running from it. And I wanted them to feel every ounce of it. I wanted them to experience the same humiliation, the same vulnerability, the same helplessness that Ashley and I had endured. I wanted them to know what it was like to have your life ripped open for everyone you cared about to see. From what I could tell, I got my wish. Madison's family, people who had been at our wedding, who had celebrated every milestone with us, started calling me. They were confused, embarrassed, unsure of what to say or do. But I didn't care. Every call went straight to voicemail, and every message was deleted without a second thought. What did they expect me to say? Sure, no problem. My wife destroyed our marriage and slept with my best friend. Let's just sweep it under the rug and move on. Not a chance. As for Madison, she was desperate. I'd never seen her like this before. She called dozens of times, leaving voicemails filled with sobs, pleas, and who knows what else. But I never listened to a single one. Why should I? She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, shattered everything we'd built for some cheap thrill with a man I'd once considered my brother. She didn't get a free pass out of this. Not this time. I erased Madison from my life as thoroughly as I could. I blocked her on every social media platform I could think of, cutting off every possible avenue for her to reach me. She became a ghost, and I made sure it stayed that way. Owen didn't fare any better. He tried reaching out to Ashley, spinning some pathetic sob story about how things had gotten out of hand and how it was all just a mistake. He even had the gall to say he still loved her, as if that would fix anything. Ashley, to her credit, wasn't buying it for a second. She was done with him, with his lies, with the constant betrayals. I could see it in her eyes, a calm and unshakable resolve that had grown in her over the past few weeks. She was stronger than I'd ever realized, and once she made up her mind to divorce him, there was no turning back. Nothing Owen said or did was going to change that. Then came the inevitable divorce. If you've never been through one, let me tell you, it's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You see the disaster coming, you know it's going to be ugly, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. The lawyers, the endless paperwork, the constant back and forth over every insignificant detail. It's exhausting. Every meeting felt like peeling off a bandage, only to find the wound underneath was worse than you'd imagined. Every conversation with Madison was a battle. She had the audacity to act like she was the victim half the time, trying to paint me as the villain for refusing to give her a chance to explain. Explain what exactly? I'd seen the videos. I knew everything I needed to know. She was a liar, a cheat, and there was no way I was going to let her manipulate me any further. Through it all, Ashley and I leaned on each other. After every grueling legal battle, we'd meet up for a drink, vent our frustrations, and try to make sense of the chaos. Every time Ashley talked about Owen, how he clung to her like a drowning man, it only solidified how toxic the situation had become. He was groveling, desperate to salvage whatever dignity he had left, but Ashley stood firm. She handled the entire process with a level of strength and clarity that left me in awe. But let's not sugarcoat it. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, like a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. I'd sit in the empty house, surrounded by the echoes of our marriage, and think about all the good times Madison and I had shared. The laughter, the love, the family we had built. It all came rushing back, every memory another stab to the chest. I'd ask myself over and over, how did it come to this? Why did she destroy everything we had? Why didn't I see it coming? The legal process only made it worse. It was like ripping apart a book I'd spent my entire life writing, page by painful page. The lawyers tried to keep things civil, but let's be real. There's no such thing as a civil divorce when betrayal is involved. Every decision, every argument was another fresh wound. Who gets the house? The car? How do we split the savings, the debt, the furniture? Every single thing became a fight. And Madison? She didn't make it any easier. She'd look at me with tear-filled eyes, trying to play on my emotions, to worm her way back into my life. But those days were over. There was no going back. Not now, not ever. Eventually, we hammered out the terms. The house was sold, the assets divided as fairly as possible, and we went our separate ways. The day I signed the divorce papers, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a deep, hollow emptiness. It was like amputating a limb that had turned rotten. Painful, but necessary. The woman I once called my soulmate had become nothing more than a name on a legal document. With the signing of those papers, that chapter of my life officially came to a close. Ashley's divorce from Owen wasn't any easier. He dragged out the process at every turn, fighting her on every detail, desperate to maintain some kind of control. But Ashley? She never flinched. She faced every obstacle with a quiet strength that I couldn't help but admire. She had been through hell, but somehow, she emerged stronger, more resilient than I ever thought possible. And when it was all said and done, when the dust finally settled, there we were, standing side by side. Two people who had lost everything but managed to hold on to each other. There was an odd satisfaction in knowing we had survived. We'd weathered the storm and made it through to the other side. As much as I hated what Madison had done to me, As much as I wished I could rewrite the past, I knew deep down that I was better off without her. Without the constant lies. Without the nagging suspicion of what else she might be hiding. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. Free from a toxic marriage. Free from the betrayal that had hung over me like a dark cloud. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scars were deep, and I'd be carrying them for years. But I was ready to move forward, to embrace a new chapter. Because sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly set yourself free. It's wild to think how much has changed. After everything, the divorces, the anger, those chaotic nights, Ashley and I somehow found ourselves leaning on each other. At first, we weren't sure what to call our relationship. Were we just two people trying to heal together? Or was it something more? We took it slow. Tentative dates. Careful conversations. Like dipping our toes into an unfamiliar pool. Testing the waters before diving in. But eventually it became clear what we had was real. We'd sit for hours talking about everything we'd been through, and for the first time it wasn't just about the pain or the betrayal. It was about the future, what we could build together. Of course, the ghosts of the past didn't vanish overnight. There were nights when I'd wake up thinking about Madison, her betrayal still cutting like an old wound that refused to heal. But then I'd look at Ashley, her smile, her laugh, her presence, and I'd feel hope. Maybe I could let go of the past after all. Ashley made it easier to breathe again, easier to trust without the constant fear of being hurt. She gave me a reason to believe that life could be good again. It was time for a clean break, to leave the echoes of that life behind me. I moved into a new apartment, an empty, unfamiliar space that felt like a blank slate. Ashley came over one night with a bottle of red wine, and we sat on the floor of that empty living room. We talked, we laughed, and yeah, we cried a little too. But as I looked around that empty room, I realized, this is what a new beginning feels like. Messy, a little scary, but freeing. And in the quiet of that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, hope. The chance to build something real, something honest. No lies, no secrets, just the truth. Ashley and I aren't rushing anything. We're taking it one day at a time, figuring things out as we go. Maybe one day, we'll leave all the drama behind, find a quiet place to start over, away from the noise and chaos. It's not a fairy tale, but it's ours. Looking back, I never could have imagined how such a mess would bring me to this point. But now, standing here with the worst behind me and Ashley by my side, I know one thing for sure. Sometimes, the darkest moments pave the way for something far better than you ever thought possible. And I'm ready to see where this new road leads.